ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. I'm now joined by Mike Davis. Mike Davis is the former Chief Counsel for Nominations of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, working for Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, a truly great American. Mike Davis is also the founder and president of the Article 3 Project, A3P. You can find it on Twitter. This organization defends constitutionalist judges and the rule of law. He's also managing partner, of course, of his own law firm. Mike Davis has been a keen observer of the tsunami of lawfare against President Donald Trump. He attended the trial in its early days. He's kept tabs on it, as he has on the Florida prosecution, the so-called disclosures case, the immunity question before the Supreme Court. I have so many things I want to ask. I almost don't know where to start. But Mike Davis, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you for having me, Roger.
So the New York trial, this takes twists and turns that are very almost entertaining. So Keith Davidson, the lawyer for Stormy Daniels, the lawyer who negotiated the non-disclosure agreement with Michael Cohen, he was actually arrested in an FBI sting when a ring was seeking to extort Hulk Hogan over a sex tape. So when the blackmailers approached Hogan went directly to the FBI. They set up an elaborate sting, and Keith Davidson was among those arrested. Strangely enough, while everybody else in that case was prosecuted, Mr. Davidson was not prosecuted. Later on in the case, his name started to be redacted from all of the government's documents regarding the prosecution of those who were involved. And sources tell me that his get out of jail free card was to give them all of his correspondence with Michael Cohen, thus first bringing the government's attention to the non-disclosure that Cohen had arranged with Stormy Daniels. And then, of course, you had Stormy Daniels herself, who testified. She's not central to the case in any way. I'm not sure what that was about. And then Cohen's dramatic testimony, first of all, on behalf of the government, but then yesterday his cross-examination. So that kind of sets the table. Let's start at the beginning. Mike, there's no real crime here, is there?
Yeah, that's the problem, Roger. We've been saying this for many, many, many months, that it is not a crime for a businessman to settle a nuisance claim with a non-disclosure agreement, hush money, as they're trying to say. In this case, it is routine. I've been a lawyer for nearly 20 years. I have settled nuisance claims on behalf of business people and businesses routinely. And as part of those settlements, you give them a payment, and they agree to keep their mouth shut. Non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements. That is very, very, very routine in the legal world. That's not a crime, and it is certainly not a crime when you pay your lawyer for a settlement that you put it in your books as a a legal expense. I don't know what the hell else you would call it if you didn't call it a legal expense. And that is the theory, I think. They haven't really explained the legal allegations in Soros-funded Manhattan DA's office, Alvin Bragg's office, but it seems the legal theory is, or at least the current legal theory, like week 5 into this trial, is that this was somehow a campaign finance violation for Trump to settle this nuisance claim and put it in his personal books, his private books that no one sees in 2017. And somehow that influenced the 2016 election. And somehow that was a federal campaign finance violation that would take what would be bookkeeping misdemeanors. They're not even bookkeeping misdemeanors because, again, a legal expense is a legal expense. But somehow those bookkeeping misdemeanors that are time barred beyond the statute of limitations from 2017 somehow has transformed to these Frankenstein 34 felony charges against President Trump 7 years later, and he's sitting in a courtroom in New York City for 2 months right during the heat of the presidential election. This is obviously Biden, Democrat lawfare, and election interference. And the silver lining out of this criminal trial for Trump, the first criminal prosecution ever of a former president, a criminal prosecution that the prior Manhattan DA, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney, the Federal Election Commission, and Alvin Bragg himself declined to prosecute. And so Matthew Colangelo got sent from a senior Biden Justice Department political appointee, the number 3 office, to bring these bogus charges. The silver lining for Trump is the American people now realize what a sham this case is and what a sham the rest of these cases are against President Trump, this Biden Democrat lawfare and election interference, and it is making President Trump stronger politically. He's going to beat Biden like a drum on November 5th, 2024.
Mike, doesn't the involvement of Colangelo kind of give up the ghost here? Doesn't show what's really going on? I mean, the guy is the number 3 official in the Biden Justice Department. He leaves there to join a county district attorney's office to lead the prosecution in this case. And before you answer, let's add to that the fact that Fonnie Wills, the Georgia prosecutor in Fulton County, and Nathan Wade, who was at least temporarily the special prosecutor against Donald Trump, both visited the Biden White House, both met with the Biden legal counsel, both met with officials at the Justice Department. We know that Letitia James and Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, and Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, same set of meetings, meeting at the White House, meeting with the Justice Department. And then, of course, Jack Smith, the special counsel, who Attorney General Garland insists is given complete and total independence. He, too, has, and members of his staff, have meetings at the highest level of the Biden Justice Department and the White House. Is this not a racketeering conspiracy for election interference?
It sounds like a good one to me, based upon what the Democrats are charging against President Trump. His top aides like Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon, his lawyers like Jeff Clark and John Eastman, his supporters on January 6th, they already went after you, Roger, as you know, with their bogus charges against you. And I would say this could be a RICO conspiracy. It could also be a conspiracy against rights, a very serious federal civil rights felony, up to 10 years in prison, when you have people inside of governments and working with people outside of government, like Andrew Weissman now, where they are colluding or conspiring to violate the civil rights of Americans. That is a criminal conspiracy under our federal civil rights laws. And so on January 20th, 2025, the Trump 47 Justice Department must open a criminal probe on this, because you have Biden's fingerprints, as you said, on all of these criminal and civil prosecutions against Trump, this unprecedented republic-ending lawfare that's being driven by President Biden himself. Like you said, Matthew Colangelo got deployed from the Biden Justice Department to bring this first indictment ever of a former president. You had Jonathan Sue, Biden's deputy White House counsel at the time, who orchestrated the Mar-a-Lago raid with the National Archives, with Gary Stern and with Jay Bratz. at the Justice Department, who's now Jack Smith's counselor or number two. And that led to the two Jack Smith indictments, one for the non-crime of objecting to a presidential election on January 6th. That's allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887 and allowed by the First Amendment. You also have the non-crime of a former president having his presidential records in the office of former president, which is allowed by the Presidential Records Act. And then you, like you said, you had Nathan Wade actually billing his time, 16 hours of his time, $250 an hour of Fulton County taxpayer money for Nathan Wade's two meetings with the Biden White House, including the Biden White House counsel, so they can conspire before Fani Willis brought her unprecedented indictment down in Georgia, again, for the non-crime of objecting to the presidential election on January 6th. This is blatant Biden Democrat lawfare and election interference. It is a criminal conspiracy, and there must be severe legal, political, and financial consequences after January 20th, 2025.
Well, if we're going to have something other than a two-tier justice system, you're absolutely right. I do remember, however, when President Trump filed a civil RICO case in Miami, which I thought, by the way, was extremely well put together. This outlined the entire Russian collusion scheme. It documented the involvement of Hillary Clinton and Jake Sullivan and John Podesta and James Comey and Andrew McCabe, the two former FBI officials, John Brennan, the rogue CIA director. I thought it was an extremely well put together complaint. I thought it was important, if for no other reason, just as a chronology. So there was a history someplace of what really happened to Donald Trump, because as you and I both know, there was no Russian collusion. There was no WikiLeaks collaboration. Hillary Clinton lost. That's what happened. But the judge in Florida, in the Southern District of Florida, a Clinton appointee, I believe, he not only dismissed the case, that's one thing, but now he's seeking $1 million sanctions against Trump's lawyers for even filing it. So the lawfare against any lawyer who simply zealously defends and represents their clients, this may be the greatest outrage in the system. It is. We've seen it weaponized again and again against any lawyer who agrees to represent Trump. And then let me be very specific in asking this question. We see the so-called documents case in Florida falling apart. First of all, Special Counsel Jack Smith brings his witnesses to a grand jury in D.C. Then he takes the transcript of those grand jury proceedings and he plays them for a Florida grand jury and gets an indictment. But the Florida grand jurors had no opportunity to ask questions of the witnesses. Have you ever heard of this happening ever before?
It's clearly grand jury abuse by Jay Bratz and Jack Smith and these operatives. And remember what this lawfare is all stemming from. Back in 2016, Hillary Clinton had her illegal home server as Secretary of State. And not only did it have our nation's most classified secrets, more problematic for Hillary is it had evidence of the Clinton Foundation's illegal foreign bribery schemes, right, where the Clinton Foundation was making a lot of money off of these corrupt dealings that they had while Hillary was the Secretary of State. When she got caught, she bleach-bitted her server and she destroyed the phones. But guess what? The Russians almost certainly, and the Chinese, but the Russians almost certainly hacked her illegal home server. And so that's where we got the Russian collusion hoax. That's where we got the corrupt, illegal Crossfire Hurricane investigation. They opened that investigation in the Obama Justice Department. They got illegal spy warrants, FISA warrants. They lied to the FISA court so they could spy on Trump as a candidate. They even spied on him as a president, because what they were trying to do is, if that damning information came out before the 2016 election, Obama, Biden, Hillary, the AG, the CIA, the DNI, the FBI, they wanted to be able to say this was a Russian disinformation campaign. It was a Russian dirty trick. You can't believe this. This was the Trump campaign being corrupt with the Russians to try to make up evidence to beat Hillary. You say, well, that sounds crazy, Mike. How could you possibly think that? Well, that's exactly what they did in 2020 with Hunter Biden's laptop showing the Biden's foreign corruption. You had the CIA working with the 51 former intel agents to say that they had all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. They got people censored. They got the New York Post censored, where the New York Post reporting was taken off social media and taken off the internet, and then the New York Post, America's oldest newspaper, was deplatformed, right? And so what happened was President Trump sued Hillary Clinton, like you said, down in Florida, for the Russian collusion hoax. And as part of that, remember, President Trump declassified the day before he left office via presidential memo the Crossfire hurricane records, right? Those are very damning. They show that the law enforcement and intel agencies worked with Hillary's campaign, the Steele dossier, to make up the Russian collusion hoax, right? And so Trump was probably going to disclose those Crossfire hurricane declassified documents as part of his civil lawsuit versus Hillary Clinton. Well, guess what happens? Bruce Reinhart was the magistrate judge down there, and he was on the case. He had to recuse because they found a 2017 Facebook post where magistrate judge Bruce Reinhart was trashing Trump. So he recused. 6 weeks later, somehow Bruce Reinhart's recusal issue magically disappeared, and he worked with Jay Bratz and the Biden Justice Department to authorize the unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful raid on the office of former presidents using the guise of the Espionage Act for presidential records Trump was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. The whole point of Mar-a-Lago was to go get back from Trump these Crossfire hurricane records, and that's the point of this lawfare. Biden, Obama, Hillary, they know that they are cooked if these documents come out. So's the AG at the time, so's the FBI director, James Comey, so's the DNI, the CIA, Clapper. So many people were implicated in that Crossfire hurricane criminal conspiracy, and that's why they ran the Mar-a-Lago raid. That's why Trump is facing 700 years in prison.
There are black beans, and then there are Goya black beans. Whole, plump, delicious, and loved by all kinds of chefs. The professional chefs at Chef's Best love them so much, they awarded our beans their Excellence Award. At Home Chefs love them so much, they awarded our beans the internationally acclaimed Goya black beans. Whole, plump, and oh so delicious. Find them in the Goya section of your local grocery store. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
Janine Pirro here with an urgent warning. While we celebrate Trump's historic win, inflation continues to drain your IRA and 401k. And China is now targeting your money with a kill shot on the dollar. That's why thousands of Americans are shielding their savings with gold and contacting the experts at Colonial Metals Group. For a free 2024 gold guide that explains everything, go to freegoldguide.com/Pirro, Pirro, or call 800-965-8004. Don't let America's enemies ruin this victory and steal your retirement money. The experts at Colonial Metals Group are the only folks that I trust to bulletproof your wealth in gold. Go to freegoldguide.com/Pirro or call 800-965-8004. 800-965-8004 for a free 2024 gold guide to learn how you can protect your life's work and if you can qualify for a free home safe and up to $7,500 in free silver now. freegoldguide.com/Pirro.
Roger Stone here for Colonial Metals Group. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Go to freegoldguide.com/stone or call 800-747-6589 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold, and it's 100% tax-free.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
You have finally, for the first time, put it all together in my mind. I see very clearly exactly what you are saying. Of course, Jack Smith was very anxious for us not to know what documents this case was about. There are so many redactions in his filings, so many things filed under seal. Judge Eileen Cannon has come under withering attack from the left, the usual suspects, Andrew Weissman, the de facto head of the Mueller witch hunt, the Neil Keitel, the former Solicitor General of the United States, Norm Eisen. These guys use their former government positions to try to give listeners and viewers the idea that they are somehow objective law enforcement authorities and that they're not vicious partisans. Barbara McQuaid, one of my favorites, she defamed me a number of times, but they use their credential as a former prosecutor to persuade you that everything they say must absolutely be true. They're just addressing these issues as, you know, as law enforcement and legal system professionals. But I think you're right. In the case of Judge Cannon, what drives the left crazy is that this, just by the wheel, by the luck of the draw, Trump got an honest judge. So when Paul Manafort, when General Michael Flynn, when George Papadopoulos, when we were prosecuted and went before a judge appointed by Obama, given the fact that the entire Russian collusion hoax was born in a meeting in Obama's office with Obama present, nobody said, oh, those guys shouldn't be allowed shouldn't have to go to be judged by a judge appointed by. No one ever raised that question. But now they say, oh, Trump's illegal activities regarding his handling of documents, which I think there is none, that can't possibly be handled by a judge who was appointed by Donald Trump.
That's a silly argument. It's a frivolous argument. And you notice that the Biden Justice Department, you notice that Jack Smith is not even making that argument to Judge Cannon. They have not raised that recusal issue with Judge Cannon because they know it's frivolous and may get them sanctioned. And so these lawfare goons on the outside, I would say this, they should also be concerned that when the Trump 47 Justice Department is back in office on January 20th, 2025, that they also may be targets of this probe for this criminal conspiracy against rights, maybe racketeering, like you said, but criminal conspiracy against rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241. Because guess what? If you have private actors colluding with government officials to violate an American's civil rights, you're part of that criminal conspiracy against rights. So I would say to all those lawfare people on the outside, like Andrew Weissman and Norm Eisen and many others, that they should preserve their documents because they could be the subject of a criminal investigation.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. We're talking to our guest, Mike Davis, the former Chief Counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we'll be right back.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Mike Davis, highly respected. This is blatant lawfare and election interference by the radical Democrats, including President Biden himself. Oh, Biden is judge, and the one circling that beautiful resolute desk in the Oval Office. Democrats do not have a case against President Trump. This is a witch hunt. This is a prosecution without a case. This is all political. This is done to damage a political opponent like a third world country would do.
That was President Donald Trump talking about our guest, Mike Davis, former Chief Counsel for Nominations to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, where he had the privilege of working for one of the greatest Americans of this century, U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley, a man of enormous courage and integrity. And Mike is also the founder and president of the Article 3 Project, which defends constitutionalist judges and the rule of law. Mike, we were talking about the documents case, but everything really, when you come down to it, comes to timing. It seems to me that the strategy here of the radical left, of the Democrats and their handmaidens in the fake news media, is to get some conviction, any conviction, against Donald Trump prior to this election. Doesn't matter to them if he is ultimately, those convictions or a conviction is reversed on appeal. It's all about the optics for the election. They want to get into a debate in which Joe Biden can ensure that President Trump's microphone is turned off when he speaks, and he attacks him for January 6th. He presumably attacks him, they hope, for being a convicted felon in New York City. This could not be more transparent. I guess the final area that I want to explore are the D.C.-based charges against Trump. In other words, first of all, none of these charges were brought in the first year of Joe Biden's presidency, which is odd in itself, nor were they brought in the second year, nor were they brought until the third year. Then at the end of the third year, they begin this strategy, realizing the unpopularity of Biden and his policies, Biden's inability to perform as a candidate, never mind as president, and the burgeoning evidence of corruption by the Biden crime family. They decide that they can't run on their own record. Their record is abysmal. So they have to take out Donald Trump. And originally, of course, we know they wanted to put him through a trial in Florida, which we've just talked about, going through his handling of documents, where I think the decision by Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who ironically was the judge in my Soviet-style show trial, ruled that Bill Clinton could do anything with his presidential documents he wanted, including keeping them in his sock drawer. And then, of course, the January 6th related charges in D.C., which when it comes to a jury is a killing field. It does not look to me, and you'd be better positioned to say, but most lawyers don't believe that there's enough time for the Supreme Court to render a decision on whether or not Trump has and is entitled to presidential immunity, which would, of course, wipe all these charges away. But should the Supreme Court come up with some kind of mixed ruling that allowed the January 6th oriented charges to go forward, is there time? Is it possible? And would it be a violation of longstanding Department of Justice policy to have a trial against Donald Trump in, say, September or October of this year?
President Biden is desperate to keep President Trump in a courtroom and off the campaign trail because President Biden knows that President Trump is going to beat Biden like a drum on November 5th, 2024. And that's why you're seeing this unprecedented Republic-ending lawfare. Driven by Biden, they brought 4 criminal indictments. They waited 7 years to bring the bogus indictment for the Bragg case in New York. They waited 3 years, 30 months, to bring the 3 other indictments for their bogus cases against Trump there. Then they timed these trials back to happen during the 2024 presidential election season. I don't think they expected that Bragg's trial would be the only one that's going to trial during this election year, but they're going to try to get the others. But President Trump brought in very good lawyers, John Sauer, the former Solicitor General for the state of Missouri, and Will Scharf, and many others, to raise this presidential immunity argument, which is before the Supreme Court now. People laughed about this argument, and it looks like that President Trump is going to win at the Supreme Court on presidential immunity before the end of June, as he should. Members of Congress are immune from criminal prosecution for their official acts, not their personal acts. Federal judges are immune from criminal prosecution for their official acts, not their personal acts. Why the hell wouldn't the president of the United States be immune from criminal prosecution for his official acts, not his personal acts, his official acts? If you can have a president throw in prison his successor, or excuse me, his predecessor, for what that president did in his official acts, you're going to destroy the presidency and therefore you're going to destroy the country. Does that mean the Trump 47 Justice Department can indict and try President Obama for capital murder for his extrajudicial drone strike on 2 American citizens, including a minor? Does that mean they can name Judge David Barron on the First Circuit Federal Court of Appeals in Boston, who was President Obama's legal advisor at the time as part of this capital murder conspiracy? Can they charge President Biden for his illegal mass parole of tens of millions of illegal immigrants into our country and the resulting crimes? They're the foreseeable crimes that these migrants are committing. Could they charge George W. Bush and Dick Cheney for lying about weapons of mass destruction to go into a war, or at least recklessness around their weapons of mass destruction that led to the Iraq War and, hundreds of thousands of people killed in Iraq, along with American soldiers and others involved with the American government? Do we really want to go down this path? And I think the Supreme Court made it very clear at oral argument on Trump's claim of presidential immunity that the Supreme Court understands the stakes involved here. This is so much bigger than Donald Trump. This is about the presidency and therefore our country.
Very, very well said. I share your high regard for both attorneys Sauer and Scharf. Will Scharf was on the show, did a great job of laying out for our listeners exactly what's happening in this tsunami of lawfare. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank our guest, Mike Davis, who is the head of the Article 3 Project. Mike, tell folks where they can find you on X, formerly known as Twitter.
Article3project.org, article number 3project.org online, and on X it's at Article 3 Projects.
All right, there you have it, folks. Thank you very much to Mike Davis for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. And folks, get a paper and pen ready, or a pencil, because before we're done today, I'm going to lay out Mrs. Stone's famous, long-coveted family secret recipe for chocolate brownies. We'll be right back.